Hello guys, today I will show you how to do completely custom engraving on your knives or basically any metal object. Let's go through what we need. First of all, we need a way to print our stencils. I'm using this Brother P-Touch D600 label printer with stencil tape. Then we need a power supply, should be around 12 volts, doesn't need much power, 1 or 2 amps is enough. If you just want to try it out and you don't have anything, you can use a 9-volt battery. Then we need an engraver. I just made one with a brass plate, a screw that's glued in this wooden holder, or you can just use a board, grind down the head and put some tape around it. Then we need some salt water as our electrolyte and of course our workpiece. Here I'm just using a piece of steel. So let's go through how this works, what it can do for you and what its limitations are. So here's our most important part, our label printer. This is a Brother P-Touch D600. It's a normal label printer, but it can also use these stencil tapes. It's not officially supported, but it still fits and works just fine. These tapes, it's just a fabric with some sort of lacquer on it. The printer then removes the lacquer and at these spots current can flow through and remove metal from your workpiece. As you can see, you can just print out simple text stencils on the printer, but it has some issues. As you can see, for this small text, it would print out a 63mm tape, which is far too long and wastes your tape. Also, you don't really know how it will turn out after it's printed because the preview isn't very good. So I would recommend, unless it is a very simple thing you want to do, just use the PC software. I will put in a small tutorial on how to use that. Here's just a quick tutorial on how to use the P-Touch editor software. Double click here to create a new layout. You can either enter text or PNG or JPEG images. The black part will be engraved, so it's best to use black and white images. I would also recommend about 6 mils of clearance on each side to make sure the print is centered, which makes it easier to fix to your workpiece since you can't really see the print on the stencil tape. I would also recommend a minimum size of about a 10 or 3 mils for text, so you don't lose too much detail. Also, if you print, make sure you use the high resolution setting on output, which really helps to get some extra resolution out of your label printer. And if you're done, just hit print and it will spit out your finished stencil. After we're done printing, we have this, which is our finished stencil. You can see it has a matte side and a shiny side. You want the shiny side facing down on your workpiece. It's also really hard to see the actual print. You have to kind of tilt it in the glare a little bit, which is why it's important that your print is centered, because otherwise you can't really figure out where it is, and you also need to insulate around it. If your print would be off to one side, it would make it really hard. If you're done, take your piece, put it on your piece of steel, and then just take some electrical tape and start gluing your workpiece down. Let me just zoom in a little bit. We'll start on one side. Just a tiny bit of coverage is enough so that it seals. Continue with the opposite side. You want it completely even on your workpiece, no folds or anything. So stretch it out a little bit. So this is good. Then continue with top and bottom. Then I like to put my workpiece on a bit of steel so I can connect the wires easier. Connect your positive wire to your workpiece and your negative wire to your engraver. Make sure this holds. Then take your electrolyte solution, just salt water, and soak your cotton pad slightly. Then take off any excess with a piece of paper. You don't want anything to drip off it, because everywhere the water flows, it will create a dark shadow and take away material, which can basically ruin your project. So you really want to avoid soaking this too much. Then turn on your power supply. I set mine to around 12 volts, which works pretty good for me. Take your engraver and then take your first bit off. I always start with putting it flat on the whole stencil. You can see where it starts to darken wherever it's taken off material. So let's do a second run. You can see it's getting much clearer. If you have a problem getting an even engraving, you can take your engraver and then slightly rub the corner wherever you need to take away more. So you can see there's a bit missing on the top, so just take it and slightly rub it. Then I want to get a little bit more out of the L. Take it, slightly tap or rub on it, change the corner so it's fresh. Great, and we're finished. Turn off your power supply and then immediately take off all of this stuff. You can see it turned out pretty good, but it's important to immediately clean it, because you now have salt water in this sort of roughed up surface. So wash it out with just take some normal water, wet a piece of paper, and then rub all of the salt out of it. After you're done, just take some oil and it should do the trick. Let's look at it. That turned out really well. So now that we're done, let's talk a little bit about the limitations of this process. It's obviously not perfect. First limitation is the resolution. This simple logo is about 1 centimeter big. Every letter is about 3 mils, and that's the minimum size you can do. You can't really make anything smaller, because you will just get unreliable prints. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes you're missing a line, and that's really bad, especially because you can't really see the print on the stencil tape. So you have to do, if you make anything critical, I recommend you do a print on a normal tape and then do 2 or 3 test runs and see if every one of them turns out good. If it is, it's probably fine. Second limitation is large surfaces. You can see the arms and the head is all black. This will all get removed, and this is also pretty much the maximum amount you can take away. It's best to optimize your prints to have smaller lines, because you can't really tell the current to flow evenly across the whole surface. it will just end up being spotty. Sometimes you're missing on this logo, sometimes you're missing an arm or part of the head, and then you can mitigate that by rubbing it with the edge of your engraver, but it can only take you so far. Most of the time you will end up taking out too much. Then on this one you will lose a bit of the eye. Or what also happens is that your stencil actually clogs up because of the material you take away, and then you won't have it would just stop working. So it's best to do a few test prints on a normal tape, see if your prints are reliable, if it's good, if you have enough detail, and if it is, try your first print on a test piece, see if it's any good, if any of the letters are too close to any lines and you break through. And if you have any larger surfaces, make sure your tape doesn't clog up and you don't get spotty engraving. It's also important to insulate around the edges. On this piece you can see it's looking pretty good. Oftentimes you will have, if your part is better polished, you will end up with a dark shadow around your print that usually goes away with just some very fine grit sandpaper. But it's very important that it is all sealed, because if any of your liquid goes through, it will create some lines around your print wherever your stencil tape was, and that's really bad. It can basically ruin your entire knife. So you have to be careful. Do a few test runs until you're confident with your setup, and then it is a really good way to get custom engraving, because your only other options are these weird laser engravers, or giving it to someone, which usually costs about 20-25 euro. The printer is around 100 euro, stencil tape about 10, and it lasts pretty long. So after a few engravings, it's pretty much even, and you will save a lot of money in the long run, and you will also be a lot more flexible, because you can do anything you like and just try it out immediately. Just print it and you're good. In the end, I would like to shout out Michael Tessen's YouTube channel, from which I got this idea. He did a video on this printer first and did a few test runs. He had some issues with low resolution on his prints, which is mostly resolved by using the high resolution setting, but also by keeping to the minimum size of the printer. At the end, I hope you liked watching this video. If you have any questions, just ask them in the comments. I wish you a lot of success with your future projects, and have a nice day.